Why do people follow you? Because they want to, not because they have to. You can't involve everyone every time. You need to set that direction. If you see a fish dying in the tank, do you fix the fish or the water?
Today I have with me Mike Jones. Mike's leadership skills and knowledge are grounded in an 18-year career in the British Army, where he served several tours of Afghanistan and Iraq, leading troops in very complex and hostile environments. And it was this experience that has given him a real understanding that only when your people are empowered, engaged and aligned around a clear mission can your team achieve its full potential. While serving, Mike had the honour to be selected as a Royal Military Academy Sandhurst instructor, where he taught leadership to the next generation of military leaders at the world's most respected leadership academy. These experiences, accompanied by him becoming an organisational psychologist, have given Mike an exceptional background in leadership, strategy and creating the right culture environments for people, teams and organisations to thrive. Mike is a successful speaker who has vast real-life experiences in leadership, resilience, mental health and underpinned by psychology to give inspirational and thought-provoking talks. I welcome the inspiring, brave and thought-provoking Mike Jones. Thank you for coming on the show, Mike. We finally got round to having this podcast today. Please introduce yourself and tell everybody a little bit about yourself and what you specialise in.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, it's great to finally be here with yourself, Richard. It's been a while since COVID. It's always a busy time for us. So I'm, as I said, Mike Jones. I'm the director of LBI Consulting. We primarily look at strategic alignment. So getting organisations to understand their core purpose, the raison d'etre for existing as an organisation, through to their strategy, really looking at sort of scenario planning, forward planning to look at those critical uncertainties. And then once we understand that, we can then align the organisation through the core capability, the structure, the culture, all the way to the management system, so that we know that the higher performing organisations are the ones that are most aligned. We try and reduce misalignment. And I do that a lot through analysis of the organisation initially, working with the senior leadership team to ask those difficult questions, make those difficult choices around actually what do we need and why do we need it and how we can best align the organisation. And that's not what I've always done. I was a soldier for 18 years, and that's really where I found my feet in leadership, leading men and women as a soldier. And then through that sort of passion of leadership, where I discovered it, I then trained to become a psychologist and became an organisational psychologist. Then unfortunately, about 3-4 years ago, I was diagnosed with complex PTSD from my time in the army. So I then had to leave the army. And that's why I took the opportunity to follow my passion and set up LBI Consulting, and not looked back since.
Excellent. I know that you worked, I don't know in terms of what form, but you have worked with a couple of rugby clubs as well, haven't you?
Yeah. So that's my first bit where I cut my teeth, really, was England rugby. So I worked with the female rugby team to really to create that culture, so that they were getting that real pull through. They were developing and putting the ownership back onto the players to develop themselves and really build their own sense of identity away from the sort of the male dominated part of the sport. And then Wasp rugby team, I worked with them to really look at leadership, and that was to use for on field, but also as a part of their development off field, because obviously the sport can be quite brutal and your career can be quite short and unfortunate due to injuries. So that's where I really sort of cut my teeth in it and found leadership. And then that's what brought me into looking at culture, because I realised leadership, it is great to do that training, but if the culture's not there to support it, then it pretty much comes to funked. And then we looked at culture, but then really if it's not aligned to the strategy, that's why we then evolved to the whole holistic view of alignment.
Well, an eclectic career as well, haven't you, in different roles, but you've always had that leadership piece 18 years is a long time as well, isn't it, in the forces?
Yeah,
Very long time.
exactly. That's one of the things we look at as we talk about leadership. And I think from the day you join in the army, leadership is always there. From everything, it's always that personal leadership, and then you then promote the next step and really focus on the next step of leadership, and then the next step. And leadership is that golden thread that follows you throughout your career.
Yeah,
that's where you look at organisations now, and it's probably not so. Probably don't really consider a leader or do any sort of development until you're senior. That's where you probably start picking up some real bad habits.
Do you implement a lot of what you've learned in the forces and the leadership and the training that you go through there? Did you trained in Sandhurst, didn't you? You were a trainer in Sandhurst?
Yeah. So I was fortunate enough to do both. So I trained soldiers as well. So at Purbright, I was a section commander there and trained soldiers. And then I was fortunate enough to get selected to be an instructor at the Royal Military Academy. That was great. That was fantastic. 2 years of my career being there to go through the selection period to be able to become an instructor. That's quite arduous as itself, and then to be there and to really hone sort of the leadership of these young officers that are coming through was a fantastic opportunity.
Sandhurst is probably one of in my opinion, it's probably the most prestigious place, isn't it? For lead, isn't it? For officers, and,
it's definitely foremost.
Yeah, I know it's probably listeners that are not aware, maybe, but that are not from the UK or from England, but it's most certainly the most prestigious one, from my opinion, anyway.
Yeah, I think that the most well known is probably, well, I'd argue Sandhurst is well known, but I suppose a lot of people might have heard of West Point with the American version. But if you look across all the armed forces, like India, pretty much most of the armed forces that are around, especially the Commonwealth, they all base their leadership academies, their officer academies off Sandhurst.
Yeah,
arguably the foremost leadership academy. We're always pushing boundaries to try and make sure that we have the best leaders to lead our men and women.
Do you implement a lot of what you learned then from you're in the forces into companies that you go and work with?
Yeah, so it's quite interesting. So when I first left, I was just like, do you know what? That was the army, and this stuff is great, but it must just be for the army. And just bear in mind, I joined the army at 17. It's all I really knew for 18 years. I think I was worried about being that stereotypical person that's left the army and now gone into leadership or into the student alignment I am, and everyone's just going to go, it's just the typical soldier is going to do the same thing. And I still had this fear of it. And so I purposely pushed that aside. But then the more I work with organisations, I've realised actually the looming leadership crisis that they have, and that actually there's a lot of fantastic stuff that the army does that just reframed slightly. It's so useful to an organisation. And now I've actually found that I've started incorporating a lot of the stuff that we were doing and we were using and helping out, because it's so useful. And the best thing about the leadership in the army, it's so practical. And one thing I hate, is a pet hate of mine, like, the management, I hate that because management is really of resources. You manage resources, you lead people. So, and I think that frame is really important. So the lens that you use to describe something will normally will have an effect on the behaviour or what you do and your behaviour and what you say. So I think that it's very important to frame yourself as a leader, because the leader is then more the moral component that you have with another person. If you look at yourself as a leader, you're more than inclined to look after that person, to lead that person, to, as Sandhurst would be, serve to lead, so that you more servant leadership, that you care and take care of that and look after that person to make sure that they've not only got the resources, the support, but you build familiarity with them, you know them, so you can you can communicate in a way that they'll understand. And it brings me back to the point where that really made me found LBI Consulting, was that question that I found asking myself when I was in Afghanistan with my troops, was that why do people follow you? Because they want to, not because they have to.
Mm-hmm.
And that's still something that sticks with me to this very much day. And a lot of that came from the leadership I learned and experienced in the army.
Let's talk about this social media piece then.
Yes.
In terms of, not just social media, but I suppose what we have access to, which is a lot of content. Go anywhere and you can learn something, can't you? You don't have to pay for stuff these days. Just there's stuff everywhere.
So I sort of made a flippant comment about impending crisis leadership that I've seen in organisations. A big element is there's definitely the organisational part of it, which I sort of alluded to around. We don't really do leadership until later on, but social media has a massive effect on that. And I think it's the same effect as it probably has on young boys and girls, that there's an image that they have to live up to.
Yeah.
And I think that's what social media is doing. Social media is so conflicting with what it is you should be to be a leader, what you should do to be a leader.
Yeah.
And actually, God, you were stuck in that tunnel of content and try to, one, exhume it all, and then two, actually live up to it.
Apply it.
You've got to be a superhero, yeah, and then to apply it, you've got to be, well, you're a better person than me because, or you're a superhero because, it's just ridiculous, and it puts people up on a pedestal, and that's not really what leadership is about.
Yeah. So we were saying, weren't we, like because I've spoke about this with other guests before as well, like the highlight reel. I have a personal Instagram account, never really use that much. I have one for the podcast, which is just kind of snippets of content. But one of the things that you do see on Instagram, especially, I suppose, the one that's favoured for it, is you do see a lot of not so much. I'm going away from the leadership piece at the minute, but you see people living these high flying lives. And I tell you what, there's a guy on YouTube that I follow. He's called CoffeeZilla. And I don't know if you've heard of him or not, but
no.
He investigates and some of these kind of fake gurus and the people that are living these wonderful lives, and they're flashing their cash about, and a lot of them is just a load of bullshit. They don't actually live these lifestyles, and he investigates them and calls them out. But you are absolutely right, and we call it the highlight reel, isn't it? It's like you see on there, and I suppose the younger generation, that's what some people think you can do. I think that there's some good stuff there. There's good stuff, but it's what you get consumed by, and it can take over, can't it? And
it's confusing because it goes a lot on pop psychology. So all of a sudden there'll be a fad in leadership that, now I've got to do this. Now what I was told to do prior is now wrong. Well, and so now there's a lot around inclusive leadership, and which is by right is a very important element. Of course you want inclusive. We know that element, but the way they perceive it is if you just do that will serve you as a leader.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't take into the complexity that exists in leadership, and that there is no really a way of doing it. Context has a massive effect on that, but it's just the way that it bounces around the flavour of the month. Now this thing is wrong. I've now got to do this.
And then what do I
do? What should I do? And no wonder leaders are so conflicted. Definitely if they're not supported in their organisations to be able to try this stuff. Mm. And then the classic that always gets me is that I know when I with my clients, we're talking about some really complex stuff. Mm-hmm. And we're definitely in an era where there's no right or wrong answers, really. There's just choices. You have a thing that's presented to you, and you have to make choices with the best evidence available to you at the time, your intuition, and etc. But you've got to make a decision. as a leader, and then we've got to sense and respond to the impact that decision's had, and then we keep going. That's complexity. We're in wicked problems. When you've got social media then saying fail fast, embrace failure, like we must be able to fail, that's how we learn to fail.
Mm-hmm.
But then on one hand, but then you look at say for instance the pandemic, completely complex issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not defending the government at this point at any time or anyone, but then you'd see the government make a decision, and on evidence that we had from hindsight, we then realise it's maybe not the best decision. They could have done this, but at that time they made the decision, and then all of a sudden it's not okay to fail, because people and that's the conflict that I think social media brings to people, that it really reduces our modern leaders' will to want to do anything, to want to step out the boundaries, to try anything, because they're afraid that they've got this perfect image that's been put out of what a leader should be, and then also that they are seeing that it's not okay to fail.
It's about getting the fundamentals right, isn't it? But then but then again, what are the fundamentals? What if you've got new stuff that's coming out? Like you said, I think the word you used, fad. That's absolutely right. You know, you get fads of all sorts of things, and you're getting it in leadership now as well. So what sort of advice would you give to? Well, actually, before we talk about it, what are some of the most common problems that you're seeing with some of your clients that you work with?
Yeah, I think there is. I think it stems. It's quite a systemic problem. So you've got on hand is that the way they've been brought up in an organisation. So most traditional organisation leadership, you don't go on any leadership training or anything until you're a senior leader. As a senior leader, you're dealing with vast complexity, and you've not had time to develop. It's like when I was saying when we were in the army, from the day that we turn up, it's all about leadership. About leadership.
Even if you're not going to go into leadership.
Well, yeah, because it's all about that personal leadership. It starts at the very level that you're a good follower, basically. That you get there on time, you have the right kit, you look after yourself, you look after each other, you anticipate what's next. You're expected to understand what we call shared consciousness, so understand what else is going on and the part you're playing it, so you can anticipate, and you're expected, even a private soldier, because you've got good eyes and good ears to keep listening and provide information. And that's and then when you get up to the next level, you're now a lance corporal, and you've got say 4 to 6 people to look after. You get taught how to look after them. So you support the section commander, and you look after them. And then when you get to corporal, then you go on a course at very junior. You talk about junior leadership, and then you've got to really prove yourself. It's quite an arduous course, and then you're tested at that until you then get prove that you're good enough to get promoted again, and then you then go on another course. You pass that course, you're enabled to be promoted, and then you become a leader and it grows then. So as you get along, it's you're
building on it, because you started with it at the beginning. It's interesting, actually. We, obviously I work for an organisation. I think we've got some fantastic training, but I don't think I've ever looked at it starting with leadership training at the very beginning, or it's not in that sense anyway. And so you've got that issue that you're not building, you're not allowing people to develop at the time. So by the time you come senior leadership, you're now expecting something from them that they've not had really conscious. Some people will pick it up, no doubt, and they do, and they do. But some people really struggle at that point, and it becomes far too much for them. So that's quite a systemic problem there. And the other part is about what do we actually incentivize as leaders. So you're not probably incentivized for the right behaviours that we want for leadership. That you look after
you look after the team, you develop the team, you give them resources to the team, that you do that pastoral element as well of leadership, and you look after the individual, you do that performance management stuff, and all those good stuff. But actually, as a leader, you're probably incentivized for your own objectives, and your own objectives to achieve something. So probably the performance management element doesn't sit there. But I think the biggest thing I probably see with leadership is that the biggest thing I'd say is, I think people are quite aware of some of the what they call the soft skills. I hate that, the softer skills of that, and they know that they've got to do this. They know they've got to be self-aware and all that, because that's quite drummed in now with social media and the facts. If they actually do it is another question. But I think it's almost, we're focusing so much on that, which is good, that we want people to be self-aware in that. Then we forget the actual hard skills of leadership as well. So when at that senior level, what I feel people really struggle with is that ability to take the long-term view. That ability to look at and understand strategy.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So
it's all focused now.
Yeah, all in the moment. Yeah. So so what sort of, I don't want you to give away all your tips and tricks, because
that's right.
But what sort of advice would you give to if there's any leaders that are listening, organisations that are listening? Because it doesn't matter whether it's in the UK, it could be anywhere, isn't it? Anyone that's got a business, an entrepreneur. What sort of advice would you give then, in terms of steps, maybe? Where do you start?
Oh, well, you could start like you said. So I really look at probably investing at the earlier stages of leadership, really getting those there. I would look at the performance management to be more balanced between behavioural and objective focused, to really start getting those behaviours, because we all have them. I fed up going to organisations and go, but our behaviours and our vision, they were written on the wall there, like, nice one. It's written on the wall.
Follow it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I've just sat in a room with you for about 2 hours, and not one of you have based any decision off those. So it shows me how well they are seated into your consciousness. And then I can then go off to Joe Bloggs sat there, and I can ask them what they're working towards, and they wouldn't know. They probably just see that as management jargon. So I think really investing in that, getting that alignment, that clarity around why we're here, because that's a great thing. It gives people purpose. People want purpose when they come to an organisation, and that really stems from what do you do as an organisation? Why does it matter? And then what steps are you taking to fulfill that? And I think you can engender that in people, and you can get a more purposeful organisation. You can get that extra bit that you want from people to give themselves. They're giving something good. So there's that element, and I really think invested in the strategic leaders to understand the boundaries between operational and strategy, get those strategic leaders to focus on strategic thinking, to have that strategic conversation, and to get them. And there's a word that I love it. I can't really ever pronounce it, so I always, when I'm trying to tell clients, I'm like,
I probably can't either.
It's called organisational ambidexterity.
Okay, I'll leave that one to you.
Yeah, what it is a posh way of saying that we understand we've got a BAU, a business as usual, that we need to look at, but we keep an eye on what's coming ahead. We understand what those critical uncertainties are, and we've got a really robust, or we've created agility in our strategy, that our strategy can adapt and shift with the changing demands in the environment. I think that's what they need to do. But what I tend to find is they're so focused on what's happening now,
the here and now.
And then by the time they've managed to lift their heads up, they've missed a boat. And then because that then causes firefighting and uncertainty, and then that increases. You imagine you're feeling that at this level, imagine then how that just multiplies as it goes down the level. I feel that they forget the impact that they have on everyone else in the organisation.
Right. Okay.
Mm.
Yeah, it must be quite an arduous task, right? Going into an organisation, and if it's, you know, in a kind of state where they don't have these layers, it sounds quite arduous in terms of how do you even go about implementing. Well, obviously you've got to start somewhere, but
Yeah.
so these strategic thinkers, how do you identify these guys in your organisation, or do you look elsewhere if you don't have them? Or
I think everyone's got the ability in varying degrees. So it's great to have these, and we can look at personality and how personality traits and people who are naturally open to experience, they can think and broadly, and then you've got your people that are less open to experience. But I think you all need to work in the true sense of what diversity, cognitive diversity in a team.
Mhm.
But I think I really applaud organisations to move away from that traditional thinking that the senior leadership is a senior leadership support strategy, and actually think about how can we, in a way that's effective, so it doesn't become too laborious of a thing, but how do we just widen it and get other people involved in the organisation? So it doesn't necessarily have to be senior leadership. It could be you're really talented, really experienced, those bedrock people that have been there for a long time and they know the industry inside out. How do we get those involved and think about actually what's coming, what's our forces for change that are happening in our environment? Let's think about those and then get them involved in that conversation, because as well it has the advantage that if you get them involved and they've took some ownership in it, then they're more than likely, because they've had some involvement in it, to implement it quite happily, rather than you've come up with this grandiose strategy of yours because in the boardroom, and then you've gone out and go, right, let's go, let's follow me. You sort of see the comedy sketches for that, and then you get that impending thing where people just roll their eyes. And again, coming back to that social media thing, I think really social media really plays on that, makes leadership a very lonely road, because it makes out, and they still reinforce, some areas it's getting better, but some areas really still reinforce this great man theory of a leader, that they have all the answers, they must have the answers because they're the leader, they're in that position. When actually
everyone's learning. Everyone's learning. Doesn't matter what position you're in. Yeah,
exactly. And we're humans. We're fallible. We make mistakes. We generally don't know everything, and it's impossible for us to know everything. So actually, the more that we can to get people involved, and it's great to get people involved. Get them understand, get the different ideas, and listen and really stretch your own assumptions of what you thought was true. Really open yourself up. But then there needs to come to a time where the leader does come into his own, and it's I've listened to everything. I think this is, from what you've said, this is our best choice. Let's make that decision, and then you need to make sure then it gets delivered.
Involvement equals commitment.
It does. And it's a great set. And plus, honestly, it's so, like, I sit there, and I still sit there with some of my clients in some awe of some of the complexity they've got to deal with. It's unimaginable to think that you can, as a one person, come up with those answers. You can't, even with 10, 20, 50 people there that are the greatest minds in the world. You can come up with a choice.
Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the right choice.
No.
But it is about the involvement. Sorry, go on.
No, I think you're exactly right. It is about that environment. We have a better chance if we have more people looking at the problem involving different levels and break down those perceived hierarchical boundaries that I couldn't possibly know, because I'm your floor worker. But realise that actually everyone's got something to give, and the leaders to have that humility to say, do you know what, I can't do it. And I think that's bringing up to another point in organisations. Probably humility is a key factor that is unfortunately missing. And I think that links to when I said about what they're incentivized for. You're not incentivized to say, I don't know the answer, because you're deemed incompetent. What do you mean you don't know the answer? You're incompetent. You shouldn't be a leader. You've got to know. So we end up lying and saying, oh yeah, well, I think this is the best answer. And they're like, oh yeah, I'll go with that.
Yeah, you put under pressure. Like, or people feel, yeah, you're right. Absolutely right. Yeah. The hardest part about this is if you've got an organization that hasn't, I suppose, embedded that at the beginning, and you are going to have an organization, a full workforce that's almost got that same mentality. Maybe not everyone, but you're going to have a large group of people. And that's going to be a lot harder to then rewind and, help them along this new journey of, it's okay to be wrong, and that's where you see all the bad behaviors, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's the thing with organisations as well, and social media. Everything's instant, and you go into organisations and you've got this vast complexity of problems, and you're trying to solve them and work out, but they want instant results. It's the same with everything they do. They want instant results.
Yeah,
and that's just impossible. But it's what people are wired for. It's like, right, we must have results this financial year, and you're thinking, well, if you're thinking that short term, you're not going to get anywhere. You need to invest in this time and allow it to develop in the right way and invest in the right things so that you get it right the first time, and it will ensure its longevity. People are like, no, I want it now, Mike. Oh, okay. Well, you can have it if you want, but it ain't gonna happen.
What other kind of things do you come across then? I mean, like you're saying, that's probably the most common point. What other things have you seen that I suppose a bit of a trend maybe?
Yeah, a trend is that I think a really good part of leadership is around that reflective practice. All the organisations are going so fast, and they are, because pending change, but everyone's filling their diary, especially now with Teams and Zoom, and it's just even more. They're like back-to-back Zooms, and before you know it, it's Friday, and they're working into the middle of the night, and people don't stop.
I hold my hand up. I'm a bit like that as well. I'd probably say I'm a bit better than the average person, maybe, at reflecting and just trying. But I must admit, it's one thing that is difficult. And I'd say there's, I know there's lots of people out there that, it's just full on all the time, 100 miles an hour, firefighting, and then you're just like, what am I doing?
Yeah,
what do I focus on? What's the priority?
Yeah, that's the thing. It leads on to another common thing. There's no priorities. So when there's no priorities, everything is priority and everything gets resourced, and that's why everyone's burnt out. And it's got to be priorities. There is. There's a main effort of everything, and you resource the main effort first, and the priorities. And unfortunately, if you're not part of that main effort, you're still special to the organisation. Don't worry about that. But we just need to make sure this. But leaders don't stop. They just need to stop, slow down, and reflect. Actually, what are my challenges right now? Or what have been my challenges in the past week, 2 weeks, and how did I react? Is that the best way to react? Because that's the only way you're going to start getting that learning, actually, of getting that along with feedback. Feedback's important because we suffer from behaviour blindness, so we can't objectively see our behaviour like others. But it's around stopping and just looking back at how you've done and what you've done, and actually is what I'm working towards now the most important thing. If I've gone off track, that's where I was going, but suddenly, because I've just been swept away, I'm now over here. And how do I get myself back on track?
Drifted too far.
And that's it. And the reflective practice also goes into their decision making. So you'll find that leaders and leadership teams, they tend to find a problem, go straight to solutions. Mm-hmm. And they wonder then why that then it doesn't really go well, or people are thinking, how have you made that decision? That's mental. Because they're going 100 miles per hour, where maybe they first just slow it down to really understand what the problem is. Mm-hmm. What is the problem? What's the situation they're in? And think about actually what are we trying to achieve, and what's the relationship in relation to those two things. Mm-hmm. Once you really understand it, then you can come up with a plan, a decision, and then maybe then to stop and to check that decision for our own biases, because we're like, oh, that's a brilliant team, and we start high-fiving each other and that, and cheering, yes, we made the right decision. How about stop and think about, actually, if I was to destroy this plan, what would I do? And I think that's something that a lot of people could take in their own personal life as well, when they're looking at trying to develop stuff, to stop when they think about a plan. One is to know actually where they currently now, what are they trying to achieve? And then two, think about, actually, if I was to derail this, what would I do? And it makes them a bit more resilient, a more resilient plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Reflecting, I mean, things like, I've said some of this stuff on my own solo podcast about meditation and stuff. And I've tried, and I don't do it lots. So I kind of, I've sometimes reflected back on that, thinking, although I've said about it, I know it's helpful. I know meditation can help people. I do know that. But I don't, and then the reason I say preachy, because it is kind of preachy, because I don't do it much myself. But I have my own form of meditation of what I like going for. Like this week, I've just started going for a lot of walks. So every morning I just go for an hour. You're not allowed out too far here at the minute in India, where we are. But there's I've got this like little route that I go down. But that hour that I have, sometimes I listen to music, sometimes I don't. I say that this week I've been walking quite a bit, but this week I've been consistent with it. I don't always keep consistent, but I class that almost as a meditation for me. And that gives me that time to think, and I come up with, I've got a whiteboard. You can't see it, but it's there. When I come back from my walks, I just put down. I always have an idea. I either have an idea when I'm walking or when I'm in the shower. They seem to be the two times that I come up with. But it's time for me to reflect. It's not necessarily me sat down meditating specifically, but for me, that is kind of that's good for me. It works for me.
I think that's exactly right as well. And I did write a post on this on LinkedIn a while back, and it was like, am I a failure because I don't get up at 4 a.m?
Oh yeah, I've read that.
And I think that's a little sort of nod to this, and it's in the same vein as we talk about the social media impact on leadership, is the fact that people always talk about, actually, you need to do this. You need to do this. And I'm probably quite guilty of it when I post stuff on LinkedIn as well. I'm probably saying I try not to. I try to give a view of things to consider.
Try it. If it works for you, then it works for you. That's Might always come across like that when I say things, but that is, I'm never ever going to say to someone, this will work. It's what works for you. And you got to try it first.
And we're all different, and that's the same with this reflective practice. I'm a fan of it. I don't smoke normally, but I smoke shisha. I just picked up from my time in the Middle East. So I chill out and I think, and that's my way of doing it. Take the dog out for a walk. Everyone's different, and everyone has a different style. And what really frustrates me when you see on social media that you have to do this. Oh, Elon Musk done this, so this got to work because he's really fabulous and he's so successful. And it's like Google are now, and this is the thing that gets me about going to organisations. But Google are doing this, Twitter are doing this, and this bank's doing this, and I'm like, well, that's fine, but they're not you.
Yeah,
you're doing something totally different. So yes, I pour people to go and have a look at ideas, and I think that's a great idea to go learn. I can't stress, and you can't see in mine because I haven't done the typical thing where I've got them all behind me, all my books and all that are there, and I'm a prolific reader, and I applaud people to read and to look and to go off and speak to people and see what they do, and see what works for you. And that's the same for as an individual, and that's the same for an organization. Actually, what are you, and it all should come back to, what are you trying to achieve? What's your purpose? And think about actually what will help you get there. And I think that's a really good way. But don't look at these things and think that you're a failure because you can't do that. Actually, if you tried it and it hasn't worked for you or your organization, it's probably because it's not suited for what you're trying to do. It is misaligned. I think that's a key thing.
You mentioned it a few times today, haven't you, about the why, the purpose.
Have
you read the book by Simon Sinek?
Start with why.
Start with the why.
And I think that's really important. And I think that's you see a lot of organizations will drift away. They've got this really, especially see it with startups. I love seeing startup companies and stuff, and they've got this really clear, the reason why they existed, the reason why they thought of this novel problem, and they've got the thing to solve it. And it's great because that's what everyone's passionate about, and they're all focused on that. And it's just as they get bigger, where you get more public organisations, they drift away from that reason for existing, the reason why the problem they're trying to solve, and the reason why that matters and who it matters to. I think the more that you drift away from that, it causes tension. Tension in the organisation, we call it divergence. But as an individual, it causes tension because it creates a sense of unhappiness, a sense of fulfillment, because you're no longer going towards you
don't know where you're going.
And it is times where you're going to outgrow your purpose, but that you need to figure that out and to rediscover what is you're there for and your purpose. So I think we are purposeful animals as humans and organizations where we all come together as an organism of people to achieve something. And I think that's really important to make sure you can articulate that to them. Everything should fall in behind that.
So while we've been talking about this, we've been thinking about I suppose you probably had experience with this as well. I'm assuming you have. If you go into an organisation, or whether you go into it or not, or an organisation decides they've drifted, or maybe they didn't really have a why or a purpose. They've done all right. They've got to where they are, and then they decide to put down what their purpose is and their why. Why they're a tenured company, and you get some staff on board. Some of the employees get on board, but some of them don't. How do you get those ones? Because you can't involve everybody, can you? Well, you might be able to, but how do you start to get those guys on board?
That's a really complex one, and that's the thing. It's like the process is easy. Like you going to an process is easy. It's us humans. We make it bloody difficult. All our emotions and stresses and different perceptions and all that stuff causes friction. But really, yes, you're right that you can't involve everyone every time. I think you as a leadership team, you need to set that direction. I think that's what you pay for, and that's what you're there for. A leader, that's what a leader does. They should be setting a direction for a place to go. You think that as a leader, you've got to have a team around you, otherwise you're just a crazy person talk to yourself. Often like me. But so
we all do that.
Team. And you've got to try and bring people around, and you've got to look at you're always map your people. So I call it understanding the human terrain. So in your organisation, you know what you want to achieve. You best try and involve people as much as you can. It's not always practically possible. You're not going to appease everyone. It's just impossible. But you should always look at your human terrain. So in your organisation, what are the relationships? Who are those influencers that are probably resistant? Who are those influencers that are really on board? And you can best, by understanding human terrain in relationships and the thing, you can best be able to communicate it, best get people on board, and best engage with those people and understand their objections and help them understand. Because a lot of times it's just a misperception. We have this friction around imperfect information transfer, and that's caused from all sorts: personality, emotion, stresses at the time. I can say something and you may perceive it in a completely different way. And that happens numerous times in organisations. And then once we've done all that and we've done it, but this sounds quite harsh in this sense, but that's the choice of leadership. But you've got to make a decision. And once a decision's been made, then there needs to be an element of loyalty to then enact that decision as if it was your own. And I think that's the contract that exists in an organisation. You might not agree with everything, but as long as the leader or the organisation is treating you fairly, paying you well, and kept all those hygiene matters, then you should then show loyalty to enact that. And I always use this analogy, and I get some blank faces from leadership sometimes, but if you see a fish dying in the tank, do you fix the fish or the water?
Interesting.
So you would, obviously the water is the environment, and you would see the environment's right. But then we must also realise that not every fish is suited for every water. And I think that's the bold understanding that we need to. You're not going to appease everyone, and some people just aren't suited for it, and that's fine. But we don't do the old-fashioned way of right, cut you out, get out. We help them find something.
My friend and colleague will be over the moon if she hears this podcast, because I'm gonna. There's an analogy she always uses. Well, I say always use, but she's used it quite a bit, and it is, and rightly so. Says you're on the right bus, you're just in the wrong seat. It's just like it's similar, isn't it? You know, sometimes, and it might. I think what you're saying as well is sometimes you're not right for the organisation. It's just maybe not for you. But sometimes you're in the right organisation, maybe you're not in the right position.
Yes, and that's exactly it. And we've got to be real to that. And I think that a lot of people in organisations, a lot of people don't like that difficult conversation. But it's better to have that difficult conversation and have that uncomfortable feeling up front, rather than just making something miserable.
Absolutely. Absolutely, I agree. Because there are people that will be unhappy, and sometimes they need a push. It's like, look, is this right for you? Do you want to be? If you don't like it, it's all right. It's okay. Maybe you should go.
And invest a bit of time into getting them a career coach, getting them helping with interviews, helping them jobs. There's better ways to do it than traditionally where you just either, you can't just sack them for that, but you just put them in a cupboard and everyone forgets about it, and they're just like, oh yeah, don't worry about Tracy, that's just Tracy, that's the way she is. And people sort of accept it and absorb and tolerate that where actually you could just do everyone a favour and themselves by just helping them out. And I find this comes back to, again, the problem with leadership, that we promote people to the point of incompetence, really, because we have no real measure to say actually that they are proficient. So we normally promote people because they're skilled in competence.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's about assessing somebody at leadership, or do they have the right behaviours? Do they use empathy in the right way?
It's all easy. They've got the skill to be a leader. And I always say to an organisation, stop promoting people that don't have the will, want, or skill to be a leader.
Yeah.
Because it's just, some people just, and I know there was a study from Deloitte saying that there's, I don't know, something ridiculous like 80% of people can't actually be a leader. You can. Everyone can be a leader. There's varying degrees of success of leadership.
Yeah.
There is everything.
The quality. What quality of a leader? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Otherwise, everyone would be a professional football player. There's always a degree of success, isn't there? But they will find their level that they're at, and that's fine. But we tend to just promote people because they've been there for 2 years, and we think that's okay. But we don't then realise that, well, that's worked out for them because they're now getting more money. But we're not really being honest with them, because now we want them actually to do all these other type skills that they never thought of. Yeah, can't do.
Or they've not able. We've not trained them all. Yeah, we've not given them the skills. Yeah.
And then we don't understand that impact that has then on the other people they're now leading. So it's just a sort of vicious circle of dilemmas. Where actually, if you really support or reframe leadership in your organisation and develop it from the ground up, then you'll have a greater transition of people coming through. Yeah. And some people just don't want to be a leader, and that's fine. I often have people going, get fed up because they go to performance management things and they're going, telling me I need to progress, but I don't want to. That's fine. If people don't want to progress, it's fine. They're happy. Every organisation needs those people that are just content in their role. They do exactly what you tell them to do in a really good standard, and they just want to do that, and that's fine.
So look, I think we're coming to the end as well. I know you've got a lot to do. I know you were telling me before we actually got on the call, you've got quite a bit to do. I don't want to take too much of your valuable time.
No. It's been a pleasure, and hopefully I've answered your question in a coherent way. I do know that I go off in random.
No, this is good. Tangents. So is it, like, I suppose before we finish, Mike, is there anything else you'd like to share?
I'll speak to people who are in leadership now, and I suppose this is for anyone really. And I think I discovered this as I gave a talk about this, about my journey of leadership in the army, and actually had quite a horrific point at one time. And I realised that actually I was spending being the leader that I thought that I had to be, and not actually taking the time to think about, like, who am I and what strength do I have as a leader, and what unique character do I bring, my own character, to leadership. And I think that if anything would be for those budding leaders or those current leaders out there, is actually to stop and reflect actually that what type of leader do you want to be, and are you living up to that? And be honest with yourself around your strengths and weaknesses, and go and develop those and work towards it. But as long as that you are yourself, I think you'll be on a good start.
That's good advice. Thank you. If people want to reach out to you or your company, you know, if there are organisations or organisational leaders or anybody listening in, where can they go? We'll put some links in as well in the if people are listening on the podcast or if it's on YouTube. But
of course, I've got my website, www.lbiconsulting.com. Go on there, or feel to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Try and post regularly on there. I'll go from fit to start sometimes, depends how manic things are, but my team keep me on track, so you can go or hit me up on there. So please engage in there. Feel free to connect. It'd be great to hear people's challenges, questions, or whatever. I'm always happy to have a chat.
If you'd like to reach out to Mike Jones, then we have left the links in the description. This has been Richard Roser and Mike Jones. Peace out.